Hello and welcome to Not Now in Theaters. My name is Will Turntail. I'm a writer and film fan from California. For this episode, we're taking a break from the John Carpenter series I've been doing for a detour into Paul Verhoeven's Flesh and Blood. It's a 1985 Middle Ages adventure movie that completely bombed but has some real fans out there today. The words, "they wouldn't make this now," get tossed around like water, but listen to me when I say they would not make this film now. And I'm excited to tell you all the nasty, dark, and just downright mean but awesome reasons why. Before we start, a reminder that making films is hard and you have to respect that, so any criticisms are meant to be constructive. I don't think this review contains any major spoilers, but if there are some that come up, I'll do my best to call them out for you. Okay, let's get into the show. Flesh and Blood 1985 review. Paul Verhoeven goes medieval on everyone. Oh my, where do we start with Flesh and Blood? Well, how about the title? So the film is called Flesh and Blood. It delivers what it promises, but not in the balance you'd expect. There are fights and some bloody bits, but I think it's the flesh that outweighs the amount of blood. I've got to warn you all right now, this movie has rape, whores, and two warriors settling scores. This film is nasty, brutish, and not short. The runtime is 126 minutes. It is, quote, an erotic historical adventure film directed by Paul Verhoeven, director of RoboCop, Total Recall, Starship Troopers, Showgirls, and Basic Instinct. I could have started this podcast with just that description, erotic historical adventure film, with Verhoeven's name, if you know anything about his style, and you'd get it. Because this film is absolutely Paul Verhoeven going medieval on everyone. Folks, there's bubonic plague, feudal lords betraying people, and chopped up dog meat launched by catapult. This lack of glorification, or maybe you might say sanitation, didn't win fans at the box office. Released in 1985, Flesh and Blood was Verhoeven's first American movie, though it was an international co-production. It had a budget of approximately $6.5 million. Still, it only recouped an eye-watering $100,000 of that, according to sources, from a limited theatrical release. To be fair, it did receive a worldwide release, but I'm not aware of the figures. Still, it had to be a major disappointment for the film's financial backers. You see, in the early 1980s, Verhoeven was a wanted man, and not through lawlessness or sex appeal. Hollywood was wise to his skills thanks to his successful Dutch films and wanted him to come out west. So Orion Pictures, along with some other backers, secured Verhoeven for a project with a $7 million budget. But nothing went right with the production. Shot in Spain, the movie had American, Australian, British, Spanish, and Dutch actors, which made for a tricky mix. Communicating with the actors was difficult, not just because of the language barrier, but also because of the language of feedback and direction. And as an international co-production with multiple backers, many of the financiers wanted to take the film in different directions, causing frustration and confusion for Verhoeven. Next, in a bid to save on costs, Verhoeven elected not to storyboard his shots, going after a, quote, looser visual approach. And yeah, I have heard of directors not storyboarding with success. Spielberg on Schindler's List of all things as an example. But here, well, it must have failed. The lack of organization led to more delays and disagreements. And it is said that many of the cast and crew kept ditching work to go party on the beaches. Lastly, there was the constant feuding between lead actor Rutger Hauer and Verhoeven. It's said that Hauer took issue with the idea of a morally ambiguous hero, wanting to push his career toward leading man status. So Verhoeven and Hauer fought so much and so severely that it was the last collaboration between the two, who had worked together 6 times. That's like Scorsese and Leo breaking up, you know? So Flesh and Blood mostly vanished into the wash of nothingness, but with time there are whispers of a minor cult following out there. After a few blue sky posts praising the film caught my eye, I was in. And look Flesh and Blood up on a platform like Rotten Tomatoes, and you'll find it at a healthy 82% critics, 63% audience scores. I smell something misunderstood here. So let's ask the question I always ask. Is Flesh and Blood a good movie? The plot of Flesh and Blood. In 1501, an uprising wrestles control of an Italian city away from its ruler, Lord Arnolfini. But Arnolfini isn't having that shit. He summons his private mercenary army, commanded by the bearded, battle-hardened, battle-weary Hawkwood. In a rousing speech, Arnolfini promises his mercenaries that, in exchange for winning back his city, they can have 24 hours of uninterrupted looting. This promise of pillage sparks widespread carnage. Thanks to the courage and skill of fighters like Martin, the soldiers win back the city. Then they gleefully begin their rape and pillage fest. But Arnolfini has second thoughts. Apparently, medieval rape and pillage promises have refund policies. Addressing his mercenaries at cannon point and the threat of his heavy cavalry, he orders them to give everything back and get the hell out of his city. Facing a choice between death or abandoning their loot, the pissed-off mercenaries leave the goods behind and go. Later, a close-knit group of the betrayed mercenaries finds a statue of old Saint Martin in the mud. One of the group, named Cardinal, prophesizes that the statue is a sign from God for the group to follow Martin as their leader. And so a quest begins under Martin's command to follow the point of the statue's sword and find their revenge on Arnolfini. Meanwhile, Agnes, the virgin daughter of a young aristocrat, is set to marry Arnolfini's inventor/scientist son, Stephen. But as Agnes and Stephen meet for the first time, Martin and his troops attack, wounding Arnolfini. And unbeknownst to Martin and his fighters, Agnes is hiding in one of the stolen wagons. Will Stephen find and rescue Agnes from Martin and his followers? And is Agnes intent on waiting for Stephen, or is she enjoying Martin's company and the misdeeds of the group a little too much after all? And just to take you through the cast of this fine film, Lord Arnolfini is played by Fernando Hilbeck. Hawkwood is played by Jack Thompson. Martin is played by Rutger Hauer. Cardinal is played by Ronald Lacey. Agnes is played by Jennifer Jason Leigh, and Stephen by Tom Burlinson. And you can read the rest of the main cast here in the transcript. It's got a lot of really great veteran actors in this, including Bruno Kirby, Breon James, Susan Tyrrell, and more. Nancy Cartwright is also in this film, whose name you may not recognize, but you certainly know her because she is the voice of Bart Simpson, as well as some of the other characters on The Simpsons. So she's arguably the most famous person in this whole cast, but she only has a smaller part. And if you wanted to see a trailer for Flesh and Blood, I put one in the bottom of this transcript in the quote links in this episode section. You can also see the IMDb screenshots that I referenced there and any other external links. So let's talk about what stood out to me about Flesh and Blood. First, let's call this not what you're used to and give it 6 points. You get a big, fat, early clue as to what this movie's tone is. As the mercenary army stands outside the city gates, Stephen, the eager inventor, pleads with Dad, Arnolfini, to let him demonstrate his latest invention, a weapon of war. Well, it's really just a bomb. Stephen has strapped a barrel full of gunpowder to a wheelbarrow. After Arnolfini offers a gold piece to whoever has the chutzpah to test it, a volunteer emerges. And yeah, like that dark comedy you expect in a Verhoeven film, the poor guy rushes the barrel toward the city gates and, because the fuse is too short and because he doesn't hear Stephen's warnings, blows up instead. It's practically Looney Tunes, but more importantly, it's harsh. After the explosion blasts this man into pieces, someone yells out, "Next!" and Martin and the other soldiers laugh. Later, just after the battle, we go into Celine's delivery. Celine, who is a prostitute, I think, is given birth. The rest of the mercenary group has made her really comfortable by giving her a stick to put between her teeth so she can bite down when the pain comes. She's confident the baby is Martin's because even though she's definitely slept with every man in the troop, a woman just knows when the act knocks you up, according to her. Well, the baby is stillborn, and Martin, being the gentleman that he is, promises Celine he will give it a proper burial. This proper burial? Well, it's Martin shoving the carcass into a little barrel, struggling to fit the poor thing's tiny hand in the sides before he seals it up. But as Martin drops the makeshift baby casket into the mud, a discovery is made. There's a statue buried here, the statue of Saint Martin. And so as the troop uncovers and reveals the presence of the statue, Cardinal pronounces it a sign from God, instructing everyone to follow Martin as their leader and to seek vengeance against Arnolfini. That contrast, a dead baby dropping into the mud and a religious statue popping up out of said mud, is so very Verhoeven. But we're not done with these moments. Oh no. When Stephen and Agnes meet, they find two rotting dead bodies, still swinging from nooses. Agnes, following an old superstition, digs into the ground and produces a mandrake, like a little root vegetable. Stephen gives us the exposition about the belief. It's said that because men come into the ground when they're hanged, the mandrake, if a couple eats from it, will seal their love for each other. As the new couple eats the roots and then kisses, the camera zooms out to the scene of them there, underneath the rotting corpses. Yes, once again, Verhoeven is giving you the contrast between something sensitive, the lovers, and the brutal rawness of the times, the dead bodies with flesh peeling, hanging above them. It would be easy to dismiss all of this as pure cynicism, somebody aiming for disgust or shock value in their movie. And while that dark sense of humor is part of Verhoeven's work, there's more here. The film unapologetically presents an extreme portrait of a dirtier, grubbier, and more difficult time. It was the medieval era, when humans were surrounded by death, seeing it firsthand regularly. It's an age where maybe you raid a castle in 1 minute, and the lord of that castle has tricked you and turned his back on you in the next. Maybe you're Celine, lying down to give birth to a baby, but it's dead, and minutes later you're on the move again with your fellow mercenaries, your pseudo-family. Never mind the bloodstains on your pant legs or months of dreaming about motherhood. This unromanticized vision is challenging to confront, but savagely refreshing in its payoff. Next up, we've got Leigh and Hauer, Agnes and Martin, which adds 4 points. For Flesh and Blood, Verhoeven turned to a story that had been on his mind since 1970, an outline by writer Gerard Soeteman about mercenaries who are fired by a duke and then end up as former comrades on opposite sides of a feud. But Orion Pictures had other ideas. Thanks to their input, Princess Agnes was added to the script. She became the focus of the fighting, now between Martin and Stephen, locked in a battle for her affection. Though the way this movie goes, it's more like a fight over her body. Verhoeven did not like this change, and has said it taught him to never again compromise on the main storyline of a script. Still, the script changes had one significant upside: the acting talent of Jennifer Jason Leigh. Leigh was around 22 or 23 years old during filming. Still, she already had 5 film credits, including her role in Fast Times at Ridgemont High. Her commanding presence is a can't miss. Little Snow White Agnes is as manipulative as the rest of this scurvy bunch. The movie is all about doing whatever you must to survive, and young Agnes read the Darwinian handbook. We meet her as she orders her lady-in-waiting to have sex with a soldier so that Agnes can see firsthand, before meeting Stephen, just how this deed is done. She's taking mental notes, all right. When meeting Stephen, Agnes pressures him to eat from the mandrake, persuading him that, as a man of science, he should accept an experiment. She tells him her body is tingling for him. Imitating her servant, she takes Stephen's hand, presses it to her chest, and asks him if he can feel her heart beating. The seductive little witch. And there's the film's most controversial moment, when Martin, rapes Agnes. Martin commands everyone to hold her up nice and high for him. It's shocking. The entire group is gathered there as he, does his business on her. But Agnes wraps her legs around Martin, grinding him closer as the men holding her joke that now she's screwing him. She eggs him on as her lady did. "Come on, my strong soldier." Agnes seduces Martin, and he protects her from the aggressive advances of the other men in the troupe, limiting the damage. Again, it's an uncomfortable film, but when some of the film was censored, including this rape sequence, it said Jennifer Jason Leigh was opposed to it. She said, "Brutal and ugly as rape is, I know it's going to upset a lot of people, but the film is so extraordinary. Paul Verhoeven is so gifted." And I have to agree with Leigh. A rape scene is an unlikely source of good storytelling. Still, it's Agnes reaching for something to mitigate the damage against her in the worst possible moment. Her cunning mind is at work when she should be scared. Leigh's sly Agnes doesn't clue us into where her allegiances lie, waiting for Stephen's rescue or falling under Martin's spell. But I don't think it's a wishy-washy do I love him or him game that she's playing. She likes Martin, but I think she's ready to pounce on whichever man prevails in Martin and Stephen's private war over her. Then there's the power of Rutger Hauer. He's got some true charisma as Martin. But it's not all sword-slinging and woman-wooing. In a dinner scene, he gets some laughs when he turns to his knife and fork, imitating Agnes. She demonstrates the power of cutlery, and jokingly, he drops his barbaric, fists over knives eating style for the use of silverware. Martin's charisma is subtle. He saunters a bit more than the others in the group, and chooses his words more carefully. He's the last to take a wafer from Cardinal before battle, daring to put his dirty fingers in with the other wafers. And in battle, well, he's the skilled hand that saves Hawkwood from death. Thanks to Hauer's presence, you don't approve of Martin, but you like watching him. He compels you to follow his exploits. Now let's talk about some cool events and sets, which adds another 4 points. The film's practical effects age well. When the movie opens and the opening battle kicks up, with all the cannon blasts going off right around the actors and presumably a ton of extras, the immersion is impressive. And you can feel the weight of the armor and weapons. But the most impressive scene is Stephen's siege weapon, a strange, almost steampunk tank that he builds to take on Martin and his gang at their castle fortress. Complete with wheels and a long extending bridge, it's almost an alt history that we step into. But I love the film for this contraption, as it opens it up to something so batshit and new. And there's what I can only describe as the plague scene, where we, as the audience, and Agnes, know that plague is about our bandits' camp. And as the mercenaries go to drink the plague-infested water, whether or not Agnes, who knows there's plague in that agua, will warn them about the impending danger or let them suffer gruesome deaths, holds the suspense. So now let's get into what I thought could improve this movie. This first aspect we'll call cover your eyes, squeamish, which takes away 0 points. I don't want to over-egg the pudding here. This film isn't shameless, reveling in its dirtiness. Still, you may need a shower after watching. So if you're squeamish, this might not be for you. Next up, let's discuss how the film is problematically a mixed vision, which takes away 2 points. As much as I love the character of Agnes, who really ties the movie together, I wonder about what the film would have been had Verhoeven executed his original vision, the story of Martin and Hawkwood going from comrades to foes. That plotline was taken out of focus, and you can see only bits and pieces of it. And now for the lack of emphasis on the power of religion, which takes away 0 points. One of the movie's subtexts is the power of people's blind belief. Martin's followers are like religious zealots, led by the false prophecies of Cardinal, a statue, and Martin. As plot devices, the power and pointing of the statue work well. However, this isn't expanded into much of a theme when I wish it would be. I won't remove points for this. It doesn't have to be in the film. However, given that the movie is over 2 hours long and involves Hawkwood unintentionally injuring and then trying to save a nun's life, there was potential to discuss how the blind faith mentality and the peril of false idols can lead people into trouble. So adding it all up, Flesh and Blood scores 12 points. That's going to give it my should I watch rating. I absolutely love Flesh and Blood. Paul Verhoeven is a master, so even when he makes a movie as troubled as this production, it's still worth watching. And I just love movies about the medieval times, which we don't get much anymore. Studios would never make such a movie now. Imagine going into a pitch and telling the studio heads there's no hero in your movie. Not gonna get that green light. And if by some miracle you made this film today, you'd ruin it by winking to the audience that everyone in it is bad. You'd have to get more heavy-handed with an overall message, lest people think you approve of what your vile characters are doing. Flesh and Blood trusts its audience to read between the lines. Still, even with a high score, this movie gets my should I watch rating because, well, there are plenty of audiences, like my mom, who I could see just having to switch this off. But everyone with a stomach for the hard stuff, give it a watch. The Legacy of Flesh and Blood. So what's the legacy of Flesh and Blood? For Paul Verhoeven, it was a lesson learned. He had to sit back and think about where he had failed to grab Americans with this movie so that by the time RoboCop came around, he knew what Americans would like compared to Europeans. But I find that funny because much of the cynicism and shocking events in RoboCop are right there in Flesh and Blood, just not executed with anywhere near the power in the script or staging. You can think of this work, Verhoeven's first English language film, as his tuning fork for the American audiences. And the movie did get him noticed. While Flesh and Blood didn't win too many fans at release, it had one literally big one, Arnold Schwarzenegger. And along with RoboCop, this film was why he brought Paul Verhoeven in for Total Recall. As the director of Total Recall, I should say. Rutger Hauer, so badass in this movie, unfortunately seems to have peaked in terms of American film roles as Roy Batty in Ridley Scott's Blade Runner, which came out just a few years before Flesh and Blood. It's too bad. The guy was such a powerful actor. That monologue in Blade Runner about moments lost in time, like tears in the rain, is many people's pick for best film monologue of all time. Take that, Gandalf. And it says on Hauer's Wikipedia page that he composed parts of that speech himself the night before filming it, cutting some lines and adding the poignant final one himself. I guess that refers to the time to die part. But yeah, Hauer's career petered out into landing in B movies. He's somewhat of a cult actor though, being in Blade Runner, this movie, Split Second, The Hitcher, the original Buffy the Vampire Slayer movie, and Blind Fury. He does have some parts in bigger American films though. I think he's pretty great in Sin City as Cardinal Rourke, and Batman Begins as William Earl, the dude who runs Wayne Corp. Hauer is considered the greatest Dutch actor of all time, for the record. He was in Verhoeven's Turkish Delight, which was considered the best Dutch movie of the century. I believe that film was nominated for the Academy Award for Best Foreign Language Film. And did you know, if not for the fallout between Hauer and Verhoeven on this film, he may well have played Alex Murphy in RoboCop. It is said online that Verhoeven thought he was too big to fit into the suit, which may be the real reason, but I thought it was because of their creative differences. So I'm not sure on this, but I think the tension between them was part of it. I think Arnold Schwarzenegger was considered, but also too big, literally speaking, for the role as well. So perhaps that is the reason Hauer didn't land the part. It worked out though. Peter Weller as RoboCop is just the universe coming together. Flesh and Blood, for those who find it, remains a hidden gem. The lack of heroes and moral issues with every character drove audiences away then, but brings them in now. And I'm absolutely on the bandwagon too. Kentaro Miura, the creator of the Japanese manga Berserk, was inspired by this unromanticized portrayal of the medieval period. And the main character of Berserk, Guts, is loosely based on Martin of Flesh and Blood. For those who are unaware, Berserk has sold over 70 million copies since its debut in 1988. So of all the works to inspire, this one has been read around the world for almost 40 years, with intense popularity. For Jennifer Jason Leigh, who played Agnes, her controversial performance in the film added to the young actor's growing resume for taking on complex parts. Perhaps it did her some favors in casting future roles. I'm not sure. She really went through a lot on this film though. I mean, the rape scene is pretty taxing, you'd have to think. It was shot over 5 days, outside in frigid weather. And the castle they were filming in was so cold that during her naked scenes, her hands and feet would, for real, turn blue. Something that's been left out here, Basil Polidorus scored the film. He's the composer of the excellent theme for Conan the Barbarian and Conan the Destroyer. He would go on to work with Verhoeven for RoboCop and Starship Troopers. Jan de Bont was the director of photography on the film, a notable collaborator with Verhoeven. He also worked with him on films such as Turkish Delight, The Fourth Man, and Basic Instinct. But de Bont is very famous, if you don't know him. He was also a cinematographer for films like Die Hard, Black Rain, and The Hunt for Red October. And stepping into the director's chair, de Bont oversaw films like Speed and Twister. A funny fact, IMDb's trivia says there was so much competition for screen presence amongst the actors that some of them started to call the movie Flesh and Blood and Elbows, in the sense that some cast members would literally use their elbows to push others out of the frame. Lastly, you could see this film being remade in a swashbuckling direction and becoming another form of amazing. I would keep the love story and see if you can play up the old commander's rivalry with the man he wronged a little bit in the film. But can you imagine Martin as more of a playful guy? More of a Jack Sparrow from Pirates of the Caribbean kind of character? It's a version where Agnes does fall for the rogue, but she knows he's not right and has to choose. And her Stephen, well, in this version, is actually noble. It's medieval times, but less plague and more rogues and raids, high times and feasts. That would be so much more formulaic, ripping out all the Verhoeven and the lack of heroes I just said I love so much about this film, but I'd love to see that crowd-pleasing version of this film too. Okay, that's all I have for this episode. Thank you so much for listening, and if you haven't seen it yet, I hope you'll check out Flesh and Blood. And if you watched it, what do you think of the movie? Too awful or too awfully good? You can reach out and let me know on Blue Sky using the link in the transcript, or just search for Will Turntail. And if you liked this episode, would you take a minute or two of your time to leave me a review wherever you're listening from, if you haven't done that already? A few people have left reviews, and I want to thank you so much for doing that. It makes a massive difference. Or if you're listening on YouTube, be sure to like and subscribe. New episodes of this podcast come out on Tuesdays. Next week's episode will take us back to the John Carpenter series with his film Christine. It's an adaptation of a Stephen King novel where a teenager who gets picked on a lot finds a killer car with supernatural abilities to fix itself and tempts him into getting revenge on the bullies around him. People love that film, but while I certainly didn't hate it, I felt it had some issues that people could consider. So I think it will be a different episode, as most everything I review on here gets a lot of praise, and this will be one of the few times where I have mixed feelings. So tune in for next week's episode on Christine. This podcast episode is a production copyright of Overegged Media, LLC, located in Sacramento, California. Reference photos linked in the transcript are copyrighted by the Internet Movie Database. This review's factual information was gathered through online sources like Wikipedia, IMDb, or interviews. Misrepresentations and errors are possible, but unintentional. The introduction music was Neon Laser Horizon by Kevin MacLeod of Incompetech.com. It's licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 4.0 license. And the exit music and additional music are also by Kevin MacLeod of Incompetech.com, also licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 4.0 license. The names of those songs are Canon in D for 8-bit synths, Adventure Meme, Midnight Tale, and Aerosol of My Love. Goodbye for now.